Hello world, it's Austin. Let's talk about being transgender and Christian. I got a special request this week from a viewer who asked if I would talk about Genesis 1:28. You might remember this verse from the very first Transit Christian video on creation. The background to this verse is that God has just finished creating the whole world from broccoli to buffalo and is just rounding everything out with the creation of the first two humans, Adam and Eve. Then God said the very first words to the very first humans. Verse 28 says, God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So the question today is, how should transgender Christians interact with God's command to be fruitful and multiply? Some trans folks do choose to have biological children, but others aren't capable of conceiving or contributing to the conception of a child because of their hormone levels or because of having gender confirmation surgery. So is a trans person disobeying God by not physically having a biological child? Well, there are tons of different ways of thinking about this verse, so let's take a look at a couple of them. The first question we have to ask when reading Genesis 1:28 is God giving a command or is God blessing Adam and Eve? Let's read the first part of that verse again. God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply. This is one of the not very common instances where the English and the original Hebrew are almost a word-for-word translation. The tricky thing here is that in both languages, you could read this verse as, God blessed them and then said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, or God blessed them by saying to them, Be fruitful and multiply. In the first instance, God is telling Adam and Eve what to do by giving a command. In the second instance, God is blessing them and giving them a promise of a destiny that will eventually be fulfilled. Both readings of the text are equally possible. Now, if this is a blessing, then we as trans folks don't really have to worry about what we need to do or not do. But what if it's a command? If it's a command, then the next question we have to ask is this command universal or specific? That is this command specifically for Adam and Eve, or is it a command for all of humans throughout all of time? Through most of Christian history, it's been thought that this command was both. It was for Adam and Eve, but it was also for every specific human. More recently, though, some churches are starting to wonder if maybe this command isn't for each individual, but is instead for humanity as a whole. People are starting to realize that we're overpopulating the earth and using up resources much too quickly, and that as a species, we have already filled the globe and subdued it. So maybe this command has already been fulfilled, and that might bring us to other commands that maybe need our attention a little bit more. The Australian Anglican Church, for instance, recently put out a statement in the last few years that said that it might actually be a more faithful move for Christian families to restrict the number of kids they have, so that we don't accidentally break the 8th commandment by stealing resources from our children and grandchildren. We also have to think of the commandment to love our neighbors, and that might mean redistributing wealth and food and energy and opportunities to the people that already exist, rather than conceiving more children ourselves. When it comes to whether or not people are required by God to have children, we can also look at other scriptural texts, like Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Paul spends all of chapter 7 in 1 Corinthians talking about how marriage is okay, but staying single and not having kids is even better. The logic behind this, of course, is that if you don't get married and have a family, you can devote all of your time and energy to God. And this is still the reason why some clergy in certain Christian traditions are celibate. So clearly Paul, who is the most important founder of the Christian faith outside of Jesus, clearly didn't think it was required of each and every person to have kids. That fact is actually pretty surprising considering Paul was Jewish before he started following Jesus. In Jewish tradition, fulfilling the commandment to be fruitful and multiply is considered one of the greatest mitzvahs, or holy acts. In Orthodox Jewish communities today, it's thought that you only really fulfill this mitzvah if you give birth to or father both a son and a daughter. But even in Jewish communities where having kids is given such weight and importance, there are still paths for people who can't have kids. The Talmud, which is a Jewish collection of law and scholarship, says that anyone who can't fulfill this mitzvah by having a biological child should either provide for a Torah student or should adopt an orphan, and either way, that child will be as if it was your biological child. In fact, many Jews see adoption as an even greater mitzvah because it also encompasses God's command to provide for orphans. So friends, the upshot to all of this is that whether you choose to not have children, like the Apostle Paul, or whether you're physically unable to have children, there's nothing in the Bible that says that you're screwing up. Families are made in many different ways, whether it's you and your partner and 2 kids, or just you and your partner, or just you and God and your faith community. However, regardless of whether or not you choose to have children, it's clear that we as Christians have a responsibility to provide for the children in our world who need food and love and support. I can personally recommend getting involved with charities that help support kids in developing communities. In fact, this is a picture here of the little boy in Uganda who I'm supporting. His name is Usama, and he's 10 years old, and I get letters from him every couple of months, and it's great. If you want more information on how to support a kid in a developing country, I'm going to put some more information down below, along with some links to some articles with other voices talking about this whole to have kids or not have kids thing. So definitely check out those links down here. Thanks for watching the video this week, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions about a Bible verse that you've been thinking about, or a concept that you would like to have talked about or explored a little bit more, put them in the comments below, or get at me on Twitter. Either way, I'd be glad to hear from you. We will see you back here next Wednesday, everybody. Peace.